Pastor, unmute yourself.
Okay, have I just been talking to myself? Did you hear what I said? Where did you lose me? I
missed the last 30 seconds. If you don't mind, please repeat.
Yeah, I said our guest today is the MDC of Global Capital, if I'm right. He also has been in the political turf over the last few months, running for office of governor. And somehow or the other, he didn't quite get the ticket, but he's just retreating to restart again. And we're talking today on the way forward, considering what has happened in the political space over the last few hours, where we now have Bola Ahmed Tinubu as the presidential candidate for the APC, and we have our good friend Atiku Abubakar as the presidential candidate for the PDP, and a whole bunch of others, which the back office will let us know. So I'm going to be asking you, Mr. Dewa, to please give us a little background to yourself, what you do now, and how you found yourself in these very beautiful waters of politics. How did that happen, and why did you get involved? Thank you very much. You're most welcome.
Thank you for that very nice, warm welcome, Pastor Ituah. I would like to take the liberty, if I may, and start by recognizing the recent incident that happened with the Ituah shooting. I think it's an unfortunate incident. And as a Catholic myself, I take it as a personal affront. But I think it's fair to say that this is the state of our nation at this time. So if you'll permit me, with your permission, I would like to have us observe a minute of silence in the honor of the 30 people that we lost as a part of this horrendous incident. If that's okay with you, Ituah, I'd like to propose that we start with that.
Very good, very good. Let's go ahead and observe a minute in silence in honor of these gallant Nigerians that, again, their blood has been shed for the unity and the progress of this country. Amen. Amen. May all their souls and the souls of every single person, the people that passed on the train, the people that passed as armed robberies, banditry, herdsmen killing, the people that lost their lives at the NSAS toll gate, the people that lost their lives in the various coups, in the civil war, and in every effort to keep this country going, even people that lost their lives from politics and political killings, may all their souls find peace in the Almighty. May God comfort their families, and may God bring peace, lasting peace and progress to Nigeria in Jesus' name.
Amen. Amen. And I'm hoping that we'll get a chance during this conversation to maybe speak some more on that. Thank you very much for that beautiful introduction once again. I want to start by personally thanking you, Pastor Ituah, for giving me this opportunity to speak to this esteemed group. As you mentioned, my full name is Ephraim Lenka Dewa, and I'm from Plateau State, born and raised. I call myself a village boy because I was born in the village. Let me talk for maybe about a minute about what it is that I do now, and then talk a little bit about the political aspirations that I had, and then we can get into a little bit more of a deeper discussion. So I'm the chairman and CEO/MD of WSN GlobAf Capital. And that firm is essentially an asset management firm. And what we do is we help companies raise money in the areas of real estate and infrastructure with a focus on private equity. My background lends itself to that because I am a problem solver. I'm an engineer. I'm a civil structural engineer, and I am a licensed professional engineer. So I come to the table with a bit of a different attitude than most people that are in this space. I understand and can have conversations with engineers, constructors, as well as finance specialists. I also have an MBA in finance from the Wharton School of Business. I've spent some time on Wall Street. I've worked for Morgan Stanley. I've worked for Rockwood Capital. Rockwood Capital is a private equity firm that was started off as an investment office for the Rockefeller family. I had the fortune of working with them for a couple of years and learned the private equity space. So I started my own firm, which is WSN GlobAf, about 7 years ago with a focus on doing business in America and Africa wide. So that's essentially what WSN GlobAf is. In addition, if I may, I also moonlight as an adjunct professor. And I teach a few courses. I've taught those courses at Johns Hopkins Carey Business School, at Georgetown University, as well as UNLV, which is the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And the courses that I've taught have included investments, infrastructure finance. I've taught private equity. I've taught global real estate. And I've also taught public-private partnerships. Naturally, not all at the same time, but for the last 7, 8 years. And most of my students have come from Asia, China specifically, and India. And many of my students are back there helping their countries develop. So that's a little bit about me. I'm happy to get into as much detail as you'd like. But once again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to your group. I really appreciate that.
Thank you very, very much. With all this behind you and in your pocket, what made you begin to now think of politics in Nigeria and enter into the political space?
Very good question. I get asked that a lot, as you can imagine. Most of us diaspora Nigerians are sick and tired of what we see in Nigeria. And we talk about it, we lament about it, we come up with solutions. But at the end of the day, I'm one of those people that feels we're part of the problem if we're not part of the solution. So at my age, and I'm getting up there, not as old as you, Pastor Ituah, but I turned 60 this September. And at this point in my life, God has been very good to me. And I've been successful professionally. The last few years, I began a movement back to return to Nigeria because, quite frankly, my parents are getting up there in age. I was part of the group that was sent from Nigeria on a merit scholarship, a Plateau State scholarship, to go and study abroad, to learn things and bring it back home to help improve our development ecosystem. So the time came a few years ago when I started looking at that and ultimately decided 8 years ago that I would start looking at the political environment and see if the timing was right. My family and friends asked me to run for office 8 years ago. We looked at it and we concluded based on certain zoning issues that had popped their heads up on the plateau that perhaps that was not the right time. In addition to that, I was starting my business at about the same time, and I felt that the opportunity to run again was not going anywhere. So we looked at doing this 8 years from then, which is now. So we've been planning this for the last 8 years or more. And we've taken a very close look at the way the system works or doesn't work, as the case may be. I think it's fair to say that we're not in a very good place right now as a nation. I think most experts would say that we are a failed state. And I know that there are some people that would debate me on that, but this is what experts say. And all you have to do is look at some of the indices, the economic indices of Nigeria, you'll understand why that is. Unemployment is at a very astronomically high rate. I know the official rate is 33% or thereabouts, but I think if we want to be honest with ourselves, based on my conversations with a lot of youth, the youth unemployment rate in some places is 50%, in other states as much as 60%. It's not a good place to be. We're better than that. I think we're better than that because of the cadre of Nigerians that I meet every day as I travel around the world. We have a lot of talent in the country. We have a lot of talent outside the country. Somehow there's a disconnect between those two talent pools in getting together in order to move this nation forward. We are not supposed to be where we are. And so many of us in diaspora look at Nigeria, and some of us have chosen, like myself, to be a part of the solution, to get into the race and figure out how the system works and figure out how we can make a difference. So I would just say that for me, it's about legacy on the one hand, because of where I am. And most importantly, I believe that I have the skills, the background and experience to help Nigeria move forward, to basically transform our economy into a modern state. I think that there's many things that we could do better. I think we need to be more industrialized than we are. As a country, we seem to be regressing. If you take a look at the rate at which our currency is being devalued, that's not very helpful. It's not very helpful for foreign direct investment. It's not helpful for domestic investment, right? So we have a lot of challenges before us, and we got into the race because we thought we could make a difference. And we got into the race because we really think that we can bring investments from overseas to be able to change what is going on in the environment, particularly in Plateau State, which is where I'm from, right? We have a lot of opportunities. We have a lot of resources. We have a lot of the ability to excel. And somehow or the other, we've just not been able to get there. We've allowed a small group of very powerful interest groups to hijack our system. Our system, in my opinion, needs to be restructured. And I know that word means different things to different people. I'm happy to get into it. I think that the Constitution that we have doesn't suit us well. I think that, Nigeria, quite frankly, and I'll end on this, is that we have three paths forward. I think the first path that we have forward is to get it right. I think it's very important that we get it right. And that means basically creating a level playing field, not only in the political atmosphere, but also economically. Nigeria is just not a place that I would say has a level playing field. So we can do better in that regard. So getting it right, I think, is the way forward. The other two options we have, regrettably, are to continue down this path that we're on, which quite frankly, I don't think is sustainable. I really don't. And the third path, which some have prescribed, which I don't necessarily agree with, is that we split up the country and everybody goes their way. So everybody determines what their future looks like. And again, I'm not in favor of that, but those are the three options that we see. So we got into the Plateau State race, and we've learned a lot. Let's just say the baptism is over. We're not going anywhere. We're staying put. We're getting ready for the next set of elections as we speak. And I'll just leave it at that. I'm happy to get into that again with as much detail as possible or as required.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Mr. Dewa. Let's also then look at, maybe you need to tell us your experience in the field in Plateau State, your experience in the field and what you encountered and what you think. Number two, why do you think Nigeria is where it is at this point in time? And then number three, what, in your own opinion, is the way forward for Nigeria. So just give us a bit of your experience on the field, your recent experience, and so on and so forth. Why do you think Nigeria is where it is, as it is now? And what is the way forward? What do you see in the future for Nigeria?
Sure. Great questions. Let me share with you what we found in the field. We came in, we had done our research, and we had talked to several parties. We had actually been offered an opportunity to bypass the primary process by a number of parties. We chose to join the PDP because we felt that's where the greatest opportunity exists for us to make a difference. And we felt that the PDP had been in power for some time and had learned some lessons and was going to come back out stronger and basically reinvented. And we wanted to be a part of that solution. So what we encountered was a lot of right things were said. We were told that the playing field was going to be level. We were told that I was the kind of candidate that the people of Plateau State wanted. I was told that a lot of that had to do with the fact that I had not been mixed up in all the politics to date. So I was a newbie coming in, and I had no axe to grind with anybody. In addition to that, the experience that I had acquired working overseas in engineering, construction, finance, all lent themselves to the way to move Plateau State forward. Plateau State, along with most of Nigeria, has a lot of infrastructure challenges, as you know, and somebody with my background would definitely be able to understand how to navigate that space. So we came in with high hopes. We were encouraged. We met with stakeholders. We met with a lot of people. And we encountered the delegate system. I call it the delegate challenge. And as a follow-up to your second question, I would say that that's one of those challenges that I think we have as a nation. I honestly feel as though there are many people with great ideas in Nigeria. Those great ideas basically get slaughtered at the delegate level. And I think we need to take a look at that system, the delegate system. It's a system that is fraught with challenges. It's a system that basically caters to what I consider the entrenched, personal entrenched interests in the country. I believe that we came up against that. We were told what we wanted to hear, and we were encouraged. At the end of the day, what we discovered was that the interest groups, the powerful interest groups, have an interest in maintaining things the way they are because it benefits them. And so we've seen the continuation of the challenges that we've seen in Nigeria. We encountered a system that it's a money game. It's an auction. It's a money game that ultimately we decided that we did not want to play in, and we took a position of ensuring that our integrity was upheld in the process. And as a result of that, the results showed exactly where we came out. A lot of it came down, for me anyway, it was an issue of throwing good money after bad. We had made a substantial investment. We had invested in picking up the forms, the nomination forms, the expression of interest. And then that's not exactly small change. We're talking about 23, 24 million naira. And by the time we're all done with all the investments, we're in. And we were in. We ended up being one of 18 participants that was seeking the governorship. And that tells you that there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of people that want to see change. Of course, it's fair to say that there's some people that want to continue the status quo, and that's why they were in the race. So we encountered a lot of deceit. We encountered a lot of what I would call untruthfulness in the system by different participants. We encountered an ecosystem, quite frankly, that is fraught with a lot of poverty and hunger. Now, it's going to sound like I'm making the case for the delegates. I'm not, but I'm explaining why I think the delegates behave the way they do. I think that people are hungry enough that it doesn't take a lot of money, although in this case, it was a lot of money spread around, as we all can see. But in their best interest, it usually comes down to the highest bidder. So what we found out is that the system really works for a few. It doesn't work for the masses. And the masses, basically, with a high unemployment rate, with poverty rates that we're looking at, really their focus is not on the electoral system. Their focus is in making sure that they can eat. And with the insecurity issues that we've encountered for the last few years, it's made it very difficult for farmers to go to the farm and farm, right? Because of the herder-farmer crisis, among other things, we have all kinds of instability and insecurity across the nation. I think we're better than that. And I think we need to start to move forward in a direction that changes that narrative. So that's what we encountered. In terms of your second question, I think that well-meaning people that want Nigeria to progress, people that want Nigeria to move forward, and by that I mean those that are on board with the idea of transforming Nigeria into a modern state. Those people need to step up to the plate. I think that's one of the reasons we got into the race, because we got tired of complaining on the sideline. And Pastor Ituah, I've listened to some of your previous shows, and I've heard you talk about the challenge that diasporans have. We come back home and many of us get frustrated. We get frustrated because the system is really unique. The Nigerian system is different. We have several challenges. Corruption is a real problem in our system. We've institutionalized corruption, right? And that really helps a few people, but there are many people out there that just don't see the benefit of the wealth that this country has, right? So to move forward, I think one of the first things we need to do is to get good leadership. And I know that's cliche for a lot of people. What does that mean? And for me, good leadership basically means a person that has a vision for this country, that takes the youth along, that takes women along, and takes everybody along, that creates a level playing field, like I said earlier, so that business can basically occur in a way that people feel as if the playing field is level. And again, that's on the economic level, that's on the political level. And the way to move forward is for everybody to get engaged. People should be out there registering to get their PVCs and ready to vote. The system that we have, as of this point, lends itself to change through the National Assembly or through the voting system. And until people get up and get angry enough about what they see, and if they're not angry enough, then maybe that's what they want. But I think some people have checked out. Some people have checked out because they're disillusioned with the system as is. Again, I keep saying this, we're better. And let me explain what I mean. We have, at least based on my experience, I've seen a lot of value destruction in the system instead of value creation. And that's a statement that might sound stereotypical to some, but this gets to the issue of why I feel that we're better than this. Because at the end of the day, if you grow the pie, right, real economic growth, and if we have creative and innovative leadership, I don't think there's any stopping this country. We've got the talent, we've got the resources, we've got the minds, and we just need to get the right people in the right spots that will move us in the right direction. And I think it starts with leadership. That leadership does not get changed unless we vote that new leadership in. And as you mentioned, we've got two front runners right now in APC and PDP. There are other people out there trying to motivate those that are disillusioned by joining other parties I think this 2023 election is going to be very interesting. And it's one that we're watching closely. And I know the world is watching very closely because if we're going to get investment into Nigeria, we have to make Nigeria bankable. And right now, Nigeria is not bankable. And if you doubt me, just look at the recent Eurobond that was pulled off the market because of unfavorable conditions. We can do better, and we should do better. And help me out here, Pastor Ituah. Your third question was?
Yeah, what is the way forward? And maybe I should just add to that. You know, we have this very, very critical delegate system that is stifling the ability to produce good people. I don't know if the back office can project the faces or the names of the people that are presidential aspirants from the different parties. What is the way forward? How do we go forward? How do we ensure? How is Nigeria going to turn out? How is it going to pan out? What, in your opinion, do you think we're going to have to do in this great country of ours?
Okay. I think you've mentioned the key word, the delegate system. The delegate system is fraught with challenges, like I said earlier. I'm of the opinion that the political parties really need to be motivated to go to the direct system as opposed to the indirect, which is what the delegate system is. So why is that problematic? You know, we copied from the US system, supposedly. The copying was done, but I'm not so sure the pasting was done appropriately because the delegate system does not exist, at least in the form that it does in Nigeria, in the US system. And I'm not suggesting the US system is the only system in the world or anything like that, but I do know that we copied from that system. Now, I would like to think that the Electoral College in the US system is perhaps what we try to mimic with the delegate system, but their positioning in the process is different. So in order to get the voices of the people heard, we've got to get rid of the delegate system. The delegate system serves the special interests that I talk about because it lends itself to manipulation. And that's what we've seen consistently over the last 23 years or so since this new dispensation. So I think the way forward is to change the system as is, to get rid of the delegate system and go to the direct system, where we get to decide as a people who represents us in the party. If you're a member of a party, you get to vote. And that's the challenge of the direct system. Now, well, I should say that's the solution the direct system brings in. The indirect system has failed us up until now. I think we should get rid of it. And the way that we get rid of it for now, until such time as we restructure, the way that we get rid of it is through the ballot box. It's through getting involved in the political system. I think people need to get engaged. People need to go to political meetings. People need to make the noise. People need to be who they want to see in the system. If you want to sit back and expect somebody else to change the system for you, it's just not going to happen. So people need to get engaged and put the pressure on the stakeholders to get rid of the indirect system. I'm not saying that consensus is out of the question, because I think even in a direct system, you can have consensus, right? So to me, it's an issue of whether it's direct or indirect. And if you ask me, the way forward is to go with the direct system, because that's more representative of what a democracy is. So that's one thing that I would look at. And I would look at that in the interim. My first choice would be to restructure the Constitution, to restructure our electoral system. Because as I've said before, we have a system in this country that quite frankly is just not a level playing field. A friend of mine that I was talking to the other day said something that I'm happy to share in this same conversation. And he said, you know what, the demand for excellence is not optimal. It's not optimal in Nigeria. We need to figure out a way to optimize excellence. Somehow or the other, we've gotten to the point in our life cycle where we've gotten comfortable with mediocrity. Again, we're better than that. And let me clarify this. I'm not suggesting that the whole, basket is bad. I think that there's a few bad apples, and those are the bad apples that we need to focus on in order to move forward. And, if we get those two things right and get the right leadership, I think we're good to go. And why is right leadership important? I think we need leadership that has a global mindset, a mindset that understands how nations work and how we fit into that, and why it's important for us to allow certain things to happen that allow us to be global players, and maybe not allow certain things that culturally might be acceptable to us, but in a global investment scope, it might not be as acceptable. I think those are things that we have to come to terms with. We're different people. I mean, we're very diverse. We need to get to the point where justice, equity, fairness, diversity, inclusion are all good things. Right now, I don't think that's where we're at. So I think we're better than that. And the leadership that we need has to be able to understand what good governance means, the definition of good governance, the rule of law, and to be able to have the backbone, quite frankly, to be able to put in place a security architecture that protects lives and property. And then beyond that, I think we need to invest heavily in our infrastructure, because our infrastructure is, quite frankly, 19th century infrastructure. And I'm saying this from the point of view of a global infrastructure specialist that has been around the world and seen how other places are. If we're going to move forward as a country, we need to focus on developing our economy. And that comes through productivity. We need to increase productivity. We need real growth. Again, we need to grow the pie. And we have the people in this country, I know because I see them every day, that are ready to grow that pie. And if that pie is grown, there's plenty for everybody. So the way forward, if I can summarize, definitely we need good leadership. And the way that we're going to get that good leadership, like I said, is to make sure that everybody is involved. And I know that's very hard. If I'm hungry, the last thing on my mind is what's going on in the electoral process. I understand that. I totally do. And that's why education is a huge component of making sure that we get everybody on board. Getting everybody on board through education, which again is part of developing the economy, is going to take some serious investment in the educational space. I remember when I was in school, some of the courses that we learned, and I went to high school in Nigeria, some of the courses that we learned have been shelved as of this point. I think we need to go back to what our forefathers had in mind. I believe our forefathers had it right. They had a vision for this country. Yes, they had their challenges, and we'll continue to have challenges, but they had vision. It's that vision that allowed people like me to go to the United States and study on a scholarship. Our kids today don't have the same opportunities, at least not based on what I'm seeing in the Middle Belt, right? I want kids in this country to have that same opportunity. And don't get me wrong, they don't have to go to the US. A young man or woman from Plateau State can go get educated in Abeokuta or go and get educated in Onitsha. So we have those opportunities. We need to take advantage of them. So leadership is a big one. We need to obviously concentrate on revamping this political system that we have. It's just not working.
Let me just butt in there a little bit and then just ask you a very critical question at this point. We have so many people now that have passed their presidential, whatever candidature and all that. I want you to look forward, if you can, from your own perspective. Who do you think the next president of Nigeria is going to be? And how do we, if you can deep dive a little bit more on what the ordinary citizen of Nigeria can do to ensure that this direct primaries or whatever system is giving us bad results is kicked out as soon as possible and all that. And then I'm going to hand over to my co-host, Sonny Enebi, to ask a few questions and then begin the question and answer session. Thank you very much, Ephraim. It's been really wonderful being here with you. Just let me to push and do a deep dive into what we need to do and also who you think might emerge from this process that we're now in. Thank you.
So who do I think is going to win? That's a tough one. And I tell you why it's a tough one. You're not going to bait me into that, Pastor Ituah.
I want you to tell me so I know what to do and how to pray.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's have that conversation offline. But what I'm willing to say is this: I'm a PDP member, and therefore, as a result of that, I'm rooting for Atiku. Right? I think that it's going to be a dogfight, though. Having said that, because I believe that Bola Ahmed Tinubu is not a slouch. And all you have to do is look at what happened in the APC convention to understand what I mean by that. He's determined. He wants to be the next president, and he's going to fight to make sure that he gets that opportunity. Atiku has been at this for a while, and if we go by our history, you know, he's attempted to run for president at least 3 times that I'm aware of. And going by what happened in the last elections, maybe now it's his turn. And as a PDP man, I'm in full support of Atiku, and I hope that he is the one that comes out on top. But having said that, on a more serious note, I know that there are other candidates that are out there, and I have listened to them. You know, this is what I mean by we have a lot of talented people in this country. I've listened to Peter Obi, who I personally like and have followed for some time. I think that he did in Anambra State should be commended. And I think that that's a model that could serve us well. Now, given the current political dispensation and the fact that most people in this country think of us as a 2-party system, I don't know if that's going to happen for him or the other candidates. And let me explain that. I think the other parties are fragmented. They're smaller parties. And if they're going to be successful, I think they need to get together. They need to apply the APC model. I also understand that egos are such that nobody seems to be willing to step down for the other. But until the other smaller parties come together and form that third force or whatever it is that can challenge the 2 top parties in the 2-party system that we have, I personally believe it's going to be a tough haul. It's going to be challenging, not impossible, but a tough haul. So I don't know if that helps answers the question, but that's all I'm willing to say at this point.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ephraim. My name is Sonny, like Pastor Ituah said, and I will be engaging for a while. We will open up the platform for people to have a shot at asking you questions. You know, the question I want to ask, though, is we've seen a lot of people that have come from the diaspora, trying to, you know, bring back all they have learned in all their years of sojourning abroad. And no sooner have they gotten into Nigeria, they get sucked into the system, and some of them have even ended up worse. Fayose, for instance, was living in London before he became a governor of Ekiti State. We had the governor in Anambra State, Mbadi Nuju, who was a doctor in America, and a host of other people are in the various legislature. And so sometimes we seem to put a lot of premium on people that are staying in the diaspora, even though they have seen how things work out there. Why is it that they are unable to succeed when they come back here? Why is it that they are unable to deploy some of these things? You, for instance, have come back and you have joined PDP. And everybody will say, in PDP, you've started seeing what they can do. And at the end of the day, you may want to recoup the little money you have spent. And so you just go with the flow. So the question is, why and how can this thing be changed?
That's a great question. I'll share with you my personal view as to why that happens, because, you know, like I said earlier, the baptism is over for us. And so we're in it now. You know, the Nigerian ecosystem is a very powerful force. Historically, it's been very hard to come into a system that's already baked and change it, right? So what ends up happening to a lot of people, I believe, is they have two choices. When you come back, you can buck the system, or you can basically play along. And I think in some cases, perhaps that's what happened to the individuals you've mentioned. I don't know them personally, so I don't know what happened in their cases, but I'll take your word for it. I like to submit that based on my conversations with many diasporans that have gone down this path, at the end of the day, like I said earlier, many of us get frustrated. And the frustration comes in many forms. The system is the system. And if you're going to play, right, you have to be willing to do one of two things. Stand up and be counted, which is to take a position that basically puts you at odds with the system. The system is entrenched, and power interest blocks are very powerful. And, you know, I think it's fair to say that we all would probably agree that nobody gives up power willingly, right? And if nobody is willing to give up power willingly, if you're a smart enough person, at some point you realize that this change is going to take the act of God. It's going to take some major tectonic forces. So what you end up doing, what most people end up doing, is they leave and go back. And that's the frustration. Those that stay basically learn the system, and they figure out how to survive in the system as is, which is why I keep saying, and I'll keep saying this, that the system needs to be redesigned. It needs to be re-engineered. And you know, many of us in Nigeria are lovers of football. I'll describe the system in the following way. Okay, it's starting a football game, and then halfway through, the referee blows the whistle and decides, you know what? That goalpost on the one side, we're going to change it to a hockey goalpost. And the one on the opposite side, we're going to change it to American football style goalpost. And let me explain what I mean by that. The rules keep changing. If you look at the last few elections, up until the last week before the APC convention, the rules were changing, right? The PDP rules, that the delegates voting that took place under the PDP are different, based on my understanding, than the APC. And let's be honest, that's by design, right? So if a system changes that often to benefit the interest groups, you have a simple choice. You can either be a part of that system or you can leave. And many of us end up leaving. Those of us that stay have a challenge. And this is why I'm saying the way forward is for us to begin to mobilize within the system itself, because the change has to come from within the system. And it's like, you know, pulling on the string versus pushing on the string, which is easier. It's a lot easier to pull on it than to push on it. So it's a monumental task to change a gigantic, basically a Titanic, because that's what the system is. It's entrenched. So I'm not making any excuses for them, but I'm letting you know that it's a challenge. And that's a challenge we faced, and it's a challenge that I know we're going to face in the next election cycle. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I see from my vantage point, because you're right. Many people have come from abroad, whether it's the UK or, well, diasporans basically, and they come back with great ideas. They come back with passion. They come back because they see how the rest of the world operates, and they see how we operate, and they think that there's room for change. And then when they come back and they get hit with the reality, it makes it very difficult to remain in the system. You become a part of the system or you leave. And if you're going to be a part of the system, you have two choices. You become like everybody else, or you show leadership and step up to the plate and do what we've decided to do. We're going to stay and we're going to fight. We're going to fight within PDP. We're going to fight to make the changes that we believe is required to take the party in the right direction and to take the country in the right direction. That's my personal choice.
Okay, thank you very much for providing that response. Let me just ask this as a follow-up question to that. So you are in the PDP, obviously. So my questions to you will be very, very restrictive. Given that you have said we have these two front runners from the APC and the PDP, Bola Tinubu and Atiku. because you're in the PDP, you like Atiku to win. And you keep talking about changing the system so that it can work for everybody. Do you think either of these two people have what it takes to actually change the system? Are they willing to change the system? And if they are not, what can the rest of us do? Do we have any hope in 2023 to do something about changing the way our political system works?
So that's a great question on many levels, right? Because one is the ability to change the system. And I think that both of them have that ability. Obviously, their willingness to do it is a question that only they can answer, right? So I believe that they have a lot of experience. They both do. And they understand the system. And, I keep talking about change has to come from within. If they have the will to change the system, those two have the ability to change the system because they've been a part of it for long enough. Let's just say they know where all the skeletons are buried. So if they're willing to change the system, I think they can change the system. But the question is, are they willing? And will the forces that put them there allow them to? It's a fair question. I don't think we know the answer. I think that's when we have to wait and see. My prayer, and I think the prayer of a lot of people, is that whomever gets in there has got the leadership skills and is malleable enough to put the right types of policies in place that would get us moving in that direction. I honestly believe that they have the skills to do it because they're coming from within. And I think in this case, the change might be best coming from within. Now, having said that, the second part of your question is, what can the rest of us do? Again, it's a prayer. What I just said to you is a prayer, right? That until one of them wins and we see what they do, it's really hard to tell whether or not they're willing. So that said, we know that some people outside of those two main political parties that have shown an interest and willingness to make change. And I think that their antecedents prove that they can make change and are willing to make change. Again, it's a two-party system until at such time as the other parties get their act together and form a real force. Until such time, what the rest of us can do is, like I keep saying, get your PVCs, go out there and vote. Vote for the change that you want. Right now, that's the only option we have, is through the ballot box, until such time as we have the right leader that sees the injustice, the unfairness in the society and is willing to make the change to move us in a different direction. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's a tough one.
You have tried. So let's just push it a bit further. You can see on the screen now all the other contestants. And obviously, these two front runners seem to be the oldest among them. They're in their 70s. And you have been working, I'm sure, since you were in your 20s, and you know what it is. Even as you rightly said that you'll be hitting 60 by September. And even as a 60-year-old man, you know that some of the things you could do when you were in your 30s, 40s, 50s, you cannot rightly do them now. My question is, in 2023, do we have any chance with any of the other candidates? What do you think we should be doing now to give any of them a chance? I know this is an unfair question, but since you are a PDP member, but what can all these candidates do to come out with a third force that can contend strongly with the APC and the PDP? And who do you think should everyone back among the options available?
Well, I'm not going to fall into that trap, right? but I'll say this much, okay? And that is that I think sometimes in life, service to the people is more important than your own personal goals and ambitions.
Yeah.
And I think, that the people that are not part of the two main political parties, I think should have a serious discussion among themselves and figure out how they're going to fight what I would call the Goliath. Really, this is a David and Goliath story, right? And I'm not in any way minimizing any of the candidates. I'm just recognizing the obvious, and that is that you need structure. The other two parties have structure. If you look at the other parties, it's debatable whether or not they have this structure in place to be able to put on a good fight. Is that structure buildable? Absolutely. Do they have the funding and the support of people that are in the same boat as they are to get there? I think they do. Will they do it? Only they can answer that, right? So that's, if I sound like I'm ducking your question, that's really why. If you want to fight against the APC and PDP, you need to come ready. And so far, the other parties are small parties, and they're small parties that are looking to grow. And many of them don't have the infrastructure or the structure, as we say, in all the states that I've seen anyway. And I don't know everything about all the other parties, so I'm just speaking from my vantage point, and I stand corrected if I'm speaking out of turn. But the real truth is, if there's going to be competition against the two major parties, it's going to take a block of people really focusing on that and banding together. And from everything I've heard and seen, the egos are such that it's been very difficult to get there, right? So that's what I would say on that. The truth is, we cannot continue down this path. And I know that of the other candidates that you put on there, I know that there's brilliant minds among them, and I know that they can take us in a direction. I have no question in my mind that they can take us to El Dorado. I believe that. Will it happen? It's going to take people like you and people that are maybe tired of the two systems. If they want to do something about it, I think that people have to get into the political system and be part of the change they want to see. I'll leave it at that for now.
My email address is KUR.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for giving your perspective on that.
Phone number is,
you know, the topic today really is about the way forward. You know, and my assumption is that we are looking at the way forward for Nigeria, the way forward for Plateau State, personally, and we cannot discuss this way forward from the context of looking at it from a narrow prism. So we like to open up the space, really, and I'll be opening up to people to either take you up on some of the things you have said or really. Sorry. You hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, so you know, the topic for discussion today is the way forward, and our discussion should really be looking at the way forward for Nigeria, the way forward for Plateau states, the way forward for all the other states, and we cannot totally discuss that from the prism of just looking at it that PDP is the option that can provide the way forward. So on this platform, we are really apolitical, and we like to look at all the options available to us and say, what is really the way forward for us in Nigeria? Should we stick with one of these two big parties, or should we mobilize and go out behind a third force and tell them exactly what we want? Or should we be signing a citizen's contract with this big two, if you like? That's if they will obey it, if they will keep to those tenets. What is the way forward? We are where we are now. This is where we are going. So the question to you, really, looking at the topic for today, what will you prescribe as the way forward? Remove your PDP cap now. Answer as a Nigeria that is really desirous of looking at the way forward for this country.
So I will do exactly what you said. I'll remove my PDP hat. You know, I think that's a great question, and that's part of what I came on here to talk about.
Yeah.
I mean, forgetting parties for a minute, like you suggested.
Yeah.
What we need is good leadership, period.
Correct.
Right? And I think that good leadership comes in many forms.
Yeah.
I think that the two parties arguably have not performed. So if you accept that as a premise, then I think obviously there needs to be a third or fourth force, right, that can come in and change the narrative. I think that's a given. How do we do that? I think the way you do that is by mobilizing. And let me give you a deeper understanding of what I mean by that. Many people are very quick to step back and judge after the events have happened. They're reluctant to get involved in the political process. More people have to be involved in the political process. As I said earlier, the tool that we have is the PVC under the current system. I'm advocating the way forward is to basically redesign our system. That's what I'm advocating. And I've laid out two paths to that. I've said we need to get rid of the delegate system. I've said we need to restructure the country so that we have a level playing field. I've also said, I've gone out on a limb to say that the current system is not a level playing field, economically and politically. So given that, we either play within the system or we come up with a new system. And right now, the straight answer to your question is, if there's going to be a third force, that third force has to have the support. And I'm talking about financial support, as well as the support of the people. This change has to occur at the ballot box. And as long as the ballot box that we have, which was given to us since 1999 by the military, as long as that's the system that we have, until such time as we restructure it, we have to work within the current system. That's what I'm arguing, right? And so, yes, there is a need to have a third and a fourth force that can counter the entrenched two political parties. They are entrenched, they have infrastructure. Like I said, nobody gives up power willingly, and they're not about to roll over and play dead. So you're gonna have to fight for it, all right? And this is what I meant earlier when I said, we've decided we're gonna stay in the PDP and fight from within. I'm totally in favor of a third force and a fourth force because I think it creates competition. I think competition is healthy, right? So if that happens, and again, I've laid out the difficulties of that happening, I'm hoping and praying that it does happen, because what that will do is it would challenge the APC and the PDP to do the things that we've just talked about, to have to make change, right? So the way forward, I think, is at the ballot box. People have to be able to, come together. And another way that you can do this is you form blocks of economic interest. You need to go out there and mobilize people to basically form interest groups of their own and work together to make the change. And what I'm saying to you is, given the amount of money, the amount of structure that those two political parties have, it's not an easy task. And you look at the other side and you look at the egos involved. Unless those egos get checked, it's going to be very difficult to mount. This is just my opinion, right? So what I would recommend is that people that are in the other parties start to form coalitions. And we need to start to educate the electorate. I think that's a big part of this, because as I mentioned earlier, people are hungry. The poverty in this land is astronomical. And if you're hungry, the last thing you want to hear about getting a PVC and going out there and voting. But there is a critical mass of people out there that I know want change. And those people have to come together and recognize that they need to be structured, they need to be financed and funded, and they need to be ready to take the fight to the other two parties. That's what I would recommend.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. So as a politician in Plateau State, do you have structures in Plateau State?
We do. And
you do?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So the question is, if you see a viable third force, are you willing to shift your structure to support a third force? Because these structures we talk about are really human beings that other
Correct.
human beings control, right?
Right.
Okay. So the question is, you can either build your structure, purchase a structure, okay? So the question, or lobby for a structure, okay? Or lobby for a structure. So the question directly to you is, if you see, you're talking about the way forward and building a third option, are you willing to move your structure to support a third force?
The quick answer is yes, we are willing to do that.
Okay.
And, you know, we are looking at our options right now. So as a reasonable man, I'm always willing to look at other options. So I'm not going to close any doors, right? So the answer is yes, I am willing to do that. But there will be conditions, right? It'd be nice to know the level of seriousness of the group we're talking to, and if they're willing to actually do what it takes to build out not just structure within Plateau State, but structure around the country, right? Plateau State is just one of 36 states. So yes, the answer is we're always willing to talk. And like I said, we're talking to people right now. But at the end of the day, you know, there isn't much time before this particular election. Some people will argue that there is time. I would argue that whatever needs to happen has to occur within the next 30 to 45 days. And yes, while I say we have structure, our structure is in need of improvement, and we are going to continue to improve it. I mean, I think it's fair to say PDP structure is also in need of improvement, and you can say the same for the APC. At least I'm humble enough to admit it, right?
Yeah.
And that is that, you know, you need to improve your structure as you move forward, and I think our structure could be improved as well. And so, yes, the answer to your question is we're very open, and we will continue to have
fantastic. I'm happy with your response to that. I have other questions, and there are some questions on the chat box or comments that I will take, but I would go to the platform. We have about 3 people that have raised their hands. They have questions, and the way we do it is that people are free to engage you, either to make comments on what you have said or to ask their questions. So we have Tunde Apelogun, we have Datong, and then we have Ituah. Is it Ituah? Is okay. Ituah, yeah. So we'll take them in that order. Unmute yourself and ask your questions. We also have Joe Ogbe. So we'll take them in that sequence. Mr. Tunde Apelogun, you can unmute yourself, please.
Thank you, Sonny. Well done, and I really like to thank you for all your effort in bringing ideas together. What I have noticed is that those who are in the political field have the television stations. And when they present themselves as if the basic fundamental problems of Nigeria is no longer there. First, the 1999 Constitution was decreed over Nigeria. It wasn't consensus. Second, the population census that brought militaries into power, Fulanis, all the northerners into power. The population census was a rigged census. And then you look at the way the map of Nigeria has always been drawn. You will find that so many states created in the north brought about more constituencies where you have the Hausa Fulani gaining majority in the National Assembly. No matter what the president wants to do, the Fulanis and the Hausas are always the majority in the House. So, which means all the Southerners combined are captives, are enslaved. When we see Tinubu won the APC primaries, everybody will be thinking, oh, a Yoruba man is there now. And that is what all the Yorubas have always been doing. We will eventually find out that the VP candidate to support Tinubu will be coming from the north. So we have seen a lot of the Yoruba people now. They are going for Yoruba nation. They want to de-amalgamate from Nigeria because they can't see any way out of this slavery. And they have gone to the United Nations to secure representation. They have done petitions and they have secured over 5 million. So how do you want to be talking about elections, about right people, when you know yourself what is going on, that the Yoruba nations wants to stand outside Nigeria? So how do we enable, how will you go about de-amalgamating Nigeria so that everybody can go in peace?
All right, I get your question. He will answer it. So he's talking about the agitation for, regionalization and all of that. What is your view on that? Thank you very much, sir. Let me take Datong. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Presenter. I think this is a very wonderful program. I think I'll continue to listen to it anytime I get an invitation to do that.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you'll be alerted anytime we are on.
Oh, great! That's
on the platform. Yeah,
that's great. His Excellency, good to hear from you. I've had a few minutes to talk with you, and I think I was very impressed with your presentation. I want to just ask you, as a fundraising expert, an engineer, and also an infrastructure person. Nigerians generally, maybe Africans also, let me just extend it to that. They like the good things of life, but really, I don't see them really wanting to do the labor or to gather the skills that will enable them to do it themselves. So generally, we want to build skyscrapers, but we want the Chinese to do them for us, or the Americans. We want cars, but we want the Japanese to do them for us. As an aspiring leader you're a leader already, for you to aspire to that position of the governorship. You are a leader already. What would you do now or even later when you assume office to ensure that it's not just to have the good things of life, but also to have us to build that kind of skill that will enable us to build those good things in life for ourselves here, and also to extend it across the African sub-region. That is one. Number two, the delegate system, we found it to be very, very flawed. I don't know whether we had not seen this before. I don't know how it had become very obvious at this point in time. I know the American system, generally they have delegates also, but the delegates actually are schooled to do the will of the people. In fact, they are allocated to vote candidates based on what the people want. Here, generally, they are to do the bidding of the highest bidder. I have been discussing with a few of my friends, because I was also affected by the delegate election, because I also contested for the House of Representatives. The delegates actually need to be paid, because normally they leave their places of abode, they move to other locations without any logistics of travel, accommodation, feeding, and so on. So there must be a way that they need to be paid. So that is a loophole. What do you think Nigeria needs to do first to ensure that people that are going to become delegates for election of principal officers of the country do the will of the people, one, and then number two, their remunerations. How do you think Nigeria should find a way of taking care of their remunerations so that money will no longer be the primary essence of their voting, but whatever it is that people said during their campaign. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Datong. Very, very good question. Let me just take one more. Is Ituah still on the line? Is it Ituah? It's okay. Your hand is no longer raised. I hope it was Ituah or it's okay. Okay, if she's not there, Joe Obe, you can ask your question, and then he will take the 3 questions together.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Beautiful. First and foremost, I'd like to appreciate Pastor Ituah and his team for putting this together. To God be all the glory. And I'm so grateful because there's hope for Nigeria. There is hope for Nigeria. I'm so bothered about the fact that most of us think of Nigeria from the angle of the 3 major tribes: the Hausa Fulani, the Yoruba, the Igbos. And for goodness sake, we have more than 200 and something tribes. We are not bothered about the other tribes. I'm from Benue State, and I come from Idoma. Since the creation of Benue State, the Thief brothers, they have 2 senatorial districts. We have only 1. And they have monopolized the governorship seats of Benue State for years. With all the good hands in the Idoma, that is the Zone C, we have not been able to. And we keep accusing the Hausa Fulani of monopolizing the seat of power. My governor, Otom, has been at the forefront of castigating the Hausa Fulani, holding on to power and blah, 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 blah. But being the governor, I was expecting him to say, no, enough is enough. Let us support an Idoma person. No, but alas, he did not. Instead, he promoted his own people. All that he wanted was to have the power retained by the Thief brothers. It's the same thing. Nobody gives you power. Power is taken. Now we're talking of Nigeria. We just have to promote the third force. And I'm so thankful that P2B is the one representing the third force. Yes, you may not have all the money, but all the people who believe that, look, we cannot allow thieves, one on the right side and the other on the left side. How did they make their own money? Nigerians are aware of that now. How? We have somebody who has done well as governor of Anambra State. What are we doing to project him? What are we doing? I've been.
Mr. Ogbe, just wrap up, please, so that we can get around. Thanks for
yes. Okay. Yes, I'm trying to wrap up now. Thank you so much. What are we doing to project him as the force? I mean, the third force now.
Okay.
That's the angle I'm looking at. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ogbe. Sorry, Mr. Dewa, let me just take Ituah Okoje, if she can unmute now. I think because your hand was put down, the admin didn't see you. I hope you have noted those questions. So we'll just take this first round of questions. Ituah, can you unmute? No. Okay, go ahead, yeah.
Good evening to everyone. Just a quick one. Pastor, maybe you asked all the questions that I really wanted to ask, and our host answered it satisfactorily. But I am curious to our host as to what you think you would be able to do from a system that is failed, PDP or APC? What can you do from the inside? And I know that a lot of change starts from the inside, but you also said that, and we all think, and I think we all agree with you, are the people willing to change? And if we know on the whole that the people are not willing to change, and also that we're going to have to drag it out of people, nobody's going to relinquish bad power, good power without a huge fight. Would it not be better for us to go, for you, your group, to go to a party that may not have the structure and then help to build that structure, help to, organize and say, look, we can back you, but like you say, with the conditions, but also with the outlook of moving forward? Because you can't, how do we pick up the pieces? The broken pieces of PDP and APC will take a long time. So even if you're working from the inside, it's not impossible, but are we going to say it's going to take 8 years? It probably won't, because at the end of the day, nobody's willing to relinquish power and nobody's willing to make the change because it doesn't serve anybody else but their pockets, and that's the honest truth. So my question really is, I'm curious as to what you think you'd be able to do within PDP, even for the next 10 years, considering the political playing field as it is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dewa, let me let you chew on those 4 questions before we take others. Go ahead.
So let me start with the 4th question, Ituah, and then work my way back. We are at a pretty interesting time in our history. If you had, heard some of what I said earlier, I believe that there's 3 options for this country, right? 1 is we get it right. 2 is we split up. And the 3rd option is we continue down this path, which I've said is not sustainable, right? So your question is a good one. I believe that a 3rd force will bring the right challenge to the entrenched system. I think I concede that, right? The question then becomes, how do you do that? Given the fact that there's so many players in the system that are not willing to back down. That's a challenge that we have in the system, right? Everybody believes their way is the best way. And if I'm not the presidential candidate, I'm going to leave, right? And we have several examples of that. So what that says to me is that we need leaders that really believe in service, people that are willing to commit to serving the country as opposed to their own personal interests, right? Now, what can I do within a PDP? I'll tell you what. I really believe that if there were enough people within PDP that wanted to see change, the same thing that has to happen in the 3rd force, a critical mass can be formed that will begin to change the structure from within. And part of that structure, it is human beings that form this structure, right? If we form a critical mass and start to demand the changes that I've posited, I think we have a pretty good chance of doing the same thing as a 3rd force. So what type of things can we do? The constitution of the parties, for example, you can work to change that, right? I've said that direct elections are the way to go. The indirect election is problematic. I think we all see that. We all understand what the problems are. It's fraught with manipulation, right? And again, it gets to the issue of entrenched power and people not giving up power easily. So what I'm saying is change can occur within the PDP. I believe that the PDP has learned from the mistakes that it's made in the first 16 years of this new dispensation. And I believe that if they want to win elections going forward, they're going to have to start to listen to the people and do things differently. Now, that might be naive for some. Some might say, well, that's a naive point of view. I believe that change can occur within PDP. And I see myself being part of that youth that's going to get in there and push to see that change. And I think it's been said, it might take years before some of this change occurs if we stay on the current path, which is why I'm advocating, you know what, let's go our separate ways, or let's restructure this system, because I think we can all agree this system is not working for everybody, right? And I'll get to the agitations later on, but that speaks to that issue, right? There's a reason why we have this many agitations taking place. I mean, the system is not fair. The system is just not, there's no justice in the system. At least that's the perception, right? Unless you're part of the strong interest groups that have basically taken control. So what I believe I can do is start to form a critical mass, start to educate people that I know within the PDP, and start to push, again, for direct elections. That's one way that we can do that. And we can change the Constitution, right, to begin to look more like what we want, a representative government for the people, by the people. And if we're going to do that, there are several paths. And I'm proposing that this is one path, right? I'm not in any way suggesting that a new party can't accomplish the same. But again, you've got to keep in mind that unless an APC-like structure is put in place, and it's looking more and more unlikely, even though I know discussions are taking place, unless a force that's like the way APC was put together come to force, it's going to be challenging. That's all I'm saying. Not impossible, just challenging. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question, Ituah. And again, it piggies back right into what Joe talked about, right? Part of the reason why things are not working in Nigeria is because there are certain people that have basically taken control of the system and they manipulate it to their whims. I hear you. I'm from Plateau State. You're from Benue State. You know, Plateau State has over 50 ethnic groups in it, right? You're right. There's over 200 ethnic groups in this country. And it's a fair point that you raise. You know, the three major tribes have no problem keeping power among themselves. And they can do that within this structure as it's set up, which is why I would argue, Joe, that we need to restructure the system so minorities like you and I can have the same opportunity as other people that are in this country. And the way we do that is by beginning to demand excellence. And you demand excellence by being a part of the system. You can't demand it from being outside. You've got to be on the inside, or you've got to be on some team that is working towards the same goal, right? You know, the Peter Obi project is a great project because, like I said earlier, he's got great antecedents and he's made a stance very clear. The question remains, will people show up and will people vote for Peter, right? Because there are many people that are on the sidelines and if they basically feel the system is so rotten, there's nothing they can do about it. I disagree with that. I think there is something every one of us can do. And at the end of the day, you know, this is a Nigeria problem that you've just highlighted, right? And that's, in my opinion, the reason why this country needs to be restructured. Because you should have the opportunity to run for president as much as a Yoruba man, a Hausa man, or an Igbo man, right? That's not the way the system is set up right now. And you know what? One factor that we found out in research is when you combine all the minority tribes together, they are more than the 3 majority tribes put together. But can you get all of those minority tribes to work together? That's the question. That's the challenge. I don't know what the answer is, but it's work. It's a lot of work to get this done. And sitting on the fence certainly doesn't help the issue, which is why I'm in the race. And I ask you to continue to do what you're doing and begin to talk and educate other people, because that's what we have to do. Our educational system has crumbled and it needs to be revamped. That is the beginning of the process of getting to a solution, in my opinion. As an engineer, as a problem solver, you look at a problem, you look at the options, and you figure out the best path, given all the constraints. And you've got to be realistic. there's some people in this country that basically control what we do. And that's why there's so many agitations. Again, I'll come back to that. So hopefully, Joe, that answers your question. The second question came from Datong. Datong, it's good to see you. We have had a couple of conversations, and I'm glad you were able to join this session. The delegate system is what you talked about. You talked about a couple of things, the Nigerian spirit. I'm of the opinion that the Nigerian spirit has been dampened. And the reason it's been dampened is because of the way things have worked or not worked in the last several decades. So we need to go off in a different direction. But the way the system is set up right now, it's very difficult to do that. And I know that's not the answer to your question directly, but this is why all hands have to be on deck. Good meaning people have to step up to understand the problems in this country and show a willingness to do something about it. That's where it starts. It starts with us. The PVC, again, is a key instrument. The other option is to go down the path we're in, and I think you and I agree. It's just not going to work, right? So let me focus on the delegate system discussion. You're right, it is the highest bidder. You've likened it to the US system, and you're right, what you've described is the electoral college process. And that process is supposed to be an academic process, even though if you go back to the history of the electoral college in the US back in the 1800s, it was set up to basically benefit landowners. Women were not allowed to be part of that, for example, and certainly minorities were not. So that's sort of where we're at today. I hate to admit it, but we're going back to the 1800s in democracy. That's where we're at. It's taken the US over 200 years to get to where they are today. Now, I pray that it doesn't take us 200 years, but it's a fight. It's a battle. If you look at American history, it was not easy, but they got there. They got there because they had committed people that were willing to give up their lives to change things. And people lost lives to change things. And maybe that's what needs to happen in this country, that people need to be willing to give up their lives for the future of their children and grandchildren, right? Because this is what we're talking about. People often think about what's in it for them today. Nobody thinks about the future generation, right? So I'm a proponent that the delegate system that you and I came up against needs to change, or it needs to be gotten rid of, one or the other. It is a situation where you've got people that are ready to accept money in exchange for votes. And that's our system, regrettably. That's kind of the way it's set up right now, okay? Now, you mentioned something very interesting, which I like to talk about, which is the delegates being paid. I think you're onto something there, right? Because when I talk about changing the delegate system, what I'm talking about is taking the corruption and the money out of the delegate system. So how do you make the delegate system fair? How do you do that? One solution is to pay the delegates. I agree with you on that. But then who is going to pass that law? Is your National Assembly willing to do that? Are you willing to elect the people that will get into the National Assembly and do that? Are you willing to elect the right president as a leader that is willing to do that and push for that and take ownership of it, right? These are all fair questions, but I think it's a great idea. I think we need to make sure that the parties, the constitutions of the parties are changed so that people are prevented from actually paying for votes, right? And that's a monumental task in Nigeria because let's admit it, we're a corrupt society. And what we're talking about with that is taking the corruption out of the system. That's a big problem. And there are many experts that have theorized and proposed solutions to that. And maybe what needs to happen is what I'm proposing, which is a complete revamp of the system. And it starts with us. There's a social component that is missing when we talk about these things. Nigeria is not corrupt because our leaders alone are corrupt, okay? Nigeria is corrupt because yes, our leaders are corrupt, but who are our leaders? They're us, right? We've talked about that. So if we as a people are corrupt, and I'm not willing to get into a discussion of how we got there, right? That's a whole nother show, really, but that's who we are today. The system is basically corrupt, and that's what you and I face in the delegate system. How do you change that? You have to redesign the system. And part of that includes, willing to pay the delegates. And if that helps take the corruption out of the system, I'm all in favor of it. And I'd like to end on the question that Tunde asked. I think your question is a very good question, Tunde, and I think it speaks to the essence of really where we're going as a people. The issue of the Constitution, the issue of rights. Are we practicing democracy, or what are we practicing, right? And I think it gets back to a big part of our campaign vision. Our campaign vision, really, we captured everything in an acronym called SPSP. And the first S in there is security, right? I think you and I want to have the opportunity to go about our business without anybody interrupting with our ability to have free will. Ideally, and that right is provided for us by the UN Charter, right? And if somebody decides to attack you, I think you would agree with me that you have a right to defend yourself. But we're living in a system where we have a class system. Certain people can wield guns, others can't, right? The Constitution, as you've said, and I don't disagree with you, this was a 1999 Constitution that was basically put together by the military. We have several versions of constitutions that we can go back to. But again, the way the system is set up, how do you do that? That's the fundamental question. You can't just, wake up and just, wave a magic wand and go back to the 1950s or 60s and the Constitution that everybody signed up on. This Constitution, I know my people didn't sign up for it. I can tell you that. And I know that there's over 50 different groups in this country that didn't sign up for it. And there are people out there making the argument that the whole amalgamation of Nigeria, basically its term has expired. And now all this speaks to the frustration that we all have about the system. We're all frustrated. Things aren't working. Things aren't working for most of us. But you know what? Things are working fine for the vested interest groups. And they like it the way it is. So if you're going to take power away from them and change the narrative, you've got to be willing to step up to the plate and do more than just rhetoric, right? There has to be action. And part of that is the third force or the fourth force, or whatever the case may be. People have to be willing to step up and do the things that's required in order to stop this train. Because for the next 20, 30 years, if we don't do anything, our kids and grandkids are going to be born into this same system and nothing is going to change. I promise you that. The other options, like I've said, is we break up. That's what these agitations are all about. People are saying, you know what? The status quo is not working for me. And if you're not going to change the rules, I want to be able to determine my own destiny. I'm going to go off and determine that destiny. But there's a cost to that. We fought a civil war over this whole concept, right? And there are people today that are more than happy to start another war, right? If given the opportunity. And oh, by the way, we haven't talked about the religious component in all this, right? The religious extremism that exists in Nigeria is very troubling to me. I have a word to the clergy and our religious leaders. I think they can improve upon their role. I think that, the Bible is pretty clear. Judgment starts in the church. And I hope many of them are taking note, because they need to step up. They need to be part of the leadership that can help us get out of this quagmire, right? And I'm not so sure that they're all doing what is optimal in that regard. And I know I'm throwing a challenge at the church, but you know what? I started this conversation by saying that the incident that happened in Owo, Ondo State, is horrific, okay? We need to recognize that. But this is not new. It's been going on for some time, and it's going to continue to go on for some time unless there's change. And I'm talking substantial change, right? So the agitations will continue because of a lack of, or the perception of a lack of fairness in the system. Everybody wants a just system, wants a fair system, right? We want equity in the system. We want to be able to determine our destiny. We want diversity. Diversity is a good thing. Right now, we're going backwards. Everybody's dug into their respective tribes and respective regions. And we've regressed in our thinking, which is why I keep talking about having the right leadership that is creative, that is progressive, and that's innovative. And we haven't talked much about technology. Technology allows us to solve some of these problems, especially the security problem, right? The solutions are out there. Do we have the right leaders that have the backbone to adopt this? That's the question. So I hear you, I feel you, Tunde, the agitations, there's a basis for them. And I hate to say this, but I think they're going to continue until we see change. My prayer is one of the two major parties, should they win, will be moved by God to do the right thing, to change this country so we can move in the right direction. Failing that, I think that the third force or a fourth force is a good option to consider. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. I say amen to your desire for seeing a change. As we begin to wind down, I take the last three questions quickly. Thank you very much. I hope we are not putting you so much on the spot, Mr. Dewa.
That's okay.
We have Fatima, and then we have Alex Arije, and then we have Anthony Ubebo. So in that order, I'll take Fatima first, and then I'll take Alex Arije. Please be very brief with your question or comment so that we can quickly wrap up. Thank you. Fatima, you can go ahead first.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency Ephraim, thank you so much for the invite.
Glad you could come, Fatima. Welcome.
Yes. My question is, with the emergence of BAT and Atiku, we have seen the impact that a deep pocket and massive war chest continues to play in the Nigerian politics. A lot of us are advocates of good governance, rule of law, and best practices. How can we change this in the Nigerian system? How can we bring about the change that leadership is not to the highest bidder? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Auntie Fatima.
Would you like me to answer that, or do you want to?
No, let's take the three questions. This is the last set of questions we'll take. So you answer all together, then I just ask you the final question, and then we'll wrap up. So Alex, go ahead, unmute yourself.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you for the host and everybody. I do have a question, actually. I just observed something that is very ridiculous in that country regards to our youth. Our youth, they have made up their mind. They have a mindset that their vote is not counted. And as a result, they don't have PVC or whatever they have over there in order to vote. And that's so sadly because they are the one who can make this change. And I'm just wondering how we can penetrate to those people in that town, that country, that they will know or they need to be educated, the importance of democracy or something like that, so that they can understand that their vote is very, very important. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you. The final question will come from Anthony Ubebo. Anthony,
hello.
Hello.
Yes. Good afternoon. So I want to ask you, Mr. Dewa, what do you think will be the outcome of Nigeria if it maintains this trajectory, in terms of its the possibility of the collapse of the system? If there's enough tension that people want to agitate and go wherever they want to go and all that, based on the injustice, what do you think is the result of this? Because the forces that are benefiting from this, they want to maintain it, as you mentioned. But a collapse, like the Soviet Union, if it's to collapse, there's nothing anybody can do about it. So what do you think, if Nigeria maintains this trajectory, what would be the outcome, in your opinion? And by the way, just to mention, I have a PVC from 2018, and I live overseas. I came to Nigeria specifically to get a PVC. So I don't know what people are talking about not having the PVCs. I mean, this was in August of 2018, and it looked like INEC was playing some games. I went to a place at Oniru Beach. They said they moved to TSA local government. I went there. They said they moved to Antioch. I went there. They said they moved to Falamo Church of Assumption Church. I went there. They said they moved again to some place at the third roundabout on Lekki. The next day I went there and I was able to get it. I just want to mention that because INEC is saying there's 20 million PVCs in their possession, but INEC is they're not helping matters. It's like there's some games going on with INEC as far as I'm concerned, because I went through it myself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Anthony. So we'll take the answers now, and then we'll wrap up with one or two more questions. Go ahead, Mr. Dewa.
Okay. Let me again start from the last question with Anthony and then work my way up back to Fatima. Wow. It's nice to know that you're doing what you're doing, Anthony, and that you have had your PVC for as long as you've had it. And I think it would be good if somebody like you was out there in several fora, basically saying what you just said, particularly to the youth, which gets to Alex's question, which I'll come back to. I would like to see diasporans be allowed to vote. I mean, I don't know, you said you were a diasporan, so I'm assuming that you're aware that diasporans right now in the system are not allowed to vote. I think maybe that is another avenue for us to begin to inject diasporans back into the system. You know, I'm always amazed at how, as Nigerians, we're very quick to use examples of what happens in other climes, as we say, right? But when people that are in those climes that look like you and I come back, we don't meet open arms. You know, it's as though you have to pay your dues for 4, 8, 12 years before you get reaccepted back into the system. So I know that you've touched on a host of issues, including INEC. I think INEC is a part of the system. They're us. They behave like us, right? So until we have that change that forces us to rethink the way that we act, back to Alex's question, I think we're going to keep going down this path for some time. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I also know this. History is replete with examples of where people at some point rise up and change the circumstances that they're in. And I think we all know that the NSARS movement was an attempt by the youth to try to do that. We also all know what happened to that movement, right? But the fact that that movement took place is indicative or is basically symptomatic of the challenges that we have in the country. So I expect that people are honestly going to start to agitate or continue to agitate further if there's no change in the status quo. Now, having said that, I think the leadership, the vested interests recognize that because you're beginning to see change within the system. Is it happening fast enough? Probably not for most people, but there are changes. The Electoral Act was amended. I think that act in of itself has moved us away from what we used to be from last year to where we are now. Now the execution of that new law is going to be critical as to how long it takes us to get to the promised land. Okay, so there are challenges in the system. We need to get the PVC. We need people to get out there and get their PVCs and vote. And we need them to believe that their votes do count. Many people think their votes don't count. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'd encourage you to keep doing that and let people know, educate the people around you. We've got to educate people. We've got to educate people to understand that if you're not happy with the situation that you're in, there is a way to effect change. And I've talked about some of that. You have to get engaged in the system. You have to go to those meetings that the parties hold. You have to go to those meetings and make your voice heard. And you have to vote at the end of the day. If you don't vote and stand on the sideline, in my opinion, you've basically given up the right to complain. So if you don't like what's going on, get out there and do something about it. Okay. Staying with the PVC and the youth. this is a subject that's near and dear to me, the youth, right? I keep talking about the next generation. You know, somebody shared an interesting statistic with me the other day, and I'm going to share it online because it struck me as interesting. You know, Nigeria, our population growth is explosive. By the year 2045 or 2050, I don't recall, we're going to be the third most populous country in the world, right? What that says to me is what this gentleman shared with me, that more than 50% of the population of Nigeria is under the age of 20. And if you take that to the age of 30, it's approaching 55 or 60% of the population. When you look at the number of people that are voting or not voting, if that group between 20 and 30 realize this and were ready to do something about this, they could take over this country just by their sheer numbers, by getting their PVCs. But the age of 20 to 30, as we all know, it's not the age that most young people focus on political matters. Therein lies the challenge. But if the youth knew the power they had, they would take over this country. You know, early on, I was asked a question, and I did not get a chance to answer it. If you look at the leadership around the world has got leaders that are in their 30s and their 40s. Here, we're talking about candidates that are in their 70s. Now, I don't know how much technology a 70-year-old understands today to be able to understand a person that's working at, say, Flutterwave, for example, right? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm willing to bet you that they probably cannot have a conversation with the young people that are programmers at a lot of these new tech firms, right? We're missing out on that opportunity. So I think our future is in the youth, and it's in educating the youth to be able to understand exactly the power that they have. And that in of itself is a challenge. It's a challenge, though, that I think is worth focusing on. Focusing on the youth is one of the paths that we can get out of this. And I will also end on this with Alex's question. You know, culturally, I'm going to be careful with my choice of words here. Culturally, we don't take the 50% of the population as seriously as we should. And by that, I mean the women. You know, I'm one of those that has argued for the girl-child education as a part of my vision, right, for Plateau State, and I'm hoping for the country as a whole. We have women entrepreneurs, they're some of the best entrepreneurs in the world. And we minimize women in our society. We minimize the productivity that they can bring to the table. That's 50% of our workforce that we're minimizing, right? So in addition to the youth, I think the women are an area that we need to pay attention to. And I understand the cultural dynamics of why we do some of the things that we do. But if we're going to be a modern society, I think we need to start being more forward-looking. Because if we're going to be a productive society, if we're going to grow that pie, if we're going to create growth, we've got to include 50% of the population that we've been ignoring. That's my opinion about that. And so, yes, Alex, I totally agree with you. We have to motivate the youth. And how do you do that when most of them are at home? ASU strike has kept people at home for some time. When you really peel the onions, you know, most places around the world have 4-year degree programs. I talk to youth across the country, and I'm amazed at what I hear, right? Basically, if you get into college today, it might take you 6 to 10 years to graduate, right? Because of all the strikes in the system. So that in of itself is a systemic problem, that is a Nigeria-wide problem that this current system cannot solve, at least not in the near future, okay? We're bogged down by a system that has been put in since 1999, and the people that have grabbed it don't want to let go. And you know what? I don't blame them. Like I said, nobody gives up power easily. So the rest of us that want to see change, we've got to go out there and effect change. And you can do it in the current system, or you can do it outside of it, but the opportunity is there. So I'll end on that with Alex, and I'll end on Fatima's question. Fatima, it's good to see you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for that great question. You know, I got asked this question the other day, and I'll tell you, I mean, I'm talking about, you know, the fact that you need a war chest to be successful in the system. We all want good governance. We want to see change. How do we do that? Well, I liken the situation right now to Ukraine and Russia. Russia is a powerful force, a global force, and Ukraine is a smaller country. The way that Ukraine is going to be able to overcome Russia is by assistance from the world. Granted, the world has been slow in providing the aid, but it's coming. I don't know what the outcome of the war is going to be. The reason I give that analogy is to say the entrenched interests are the equivalent in my mind of Russia, okay? They've got access to state funds and they know how to use it. And that's how they build their war chest. And until the system changes and makes them create a level playing field, I don't think we're going to see much change, right, for some time, right? So how do you change that? Again, as I've maintained, it has to be done through the legislative process. It has to be done through the electoral process. That's one option. The other option is for us to have a leader that's got the backbone that's going to push for this country to be restructured. And there are forces that will fight against that because, yes, they do have the war chest and they will fight to keep the status quo. So that's what we're dealing with. At the end of the day, you're dealing with a Russia and the rest of us are Ukraine. And until we get the support that we need to be able to go toe-to-toe with Russia, it's going to be a slug. It's going to be a challenge, right? Another way to say what I just said is to talk about the David and Goliath story, right? And this is where divine intervention comes in. I know that there are many people in this country that have been on their knees for years. My God is a living God, and he is listening, and he's paying attention. When God decides all this is going to change, believe me, it'll change. So what I will leave on this note is people should keep praying. I'm a man of faith. As I said at the beginning, I'm Catholic. I was raised Catholic. I'm a Christian, and I'm proud to say that on any platform. Christianity is a beautiful message. That's you know, I just have a hard time understanding others that don't see that. But you know what? I don't impose it on them. You know, I have a problem with people saying to me, you have to follow my way of life. That doesn't sound like democracy to me, right? So, you know, Binta, the answer to your question is it's a challenge for us to get good governance without the right leadership. And it's also a challenge to get the right leadership in place, which is why, again, my prayer is that should one of the two major parties win, that they are moved by God to do the same, to do the right thing, to move this country in a different direction. Otherwise, you know, we're going to be here for a while. I mean, short of a revolution, I don't know what's going to change the system right now. Those that have tried it, I think we've seen the way that they've gone. And so I leave everything to my God. And that is when God decides all this is going to change, we are going to see change. Until then, we need to help ourselves. Get your PVC, get out there and vote, be a part of the political system, and be the change you want to be or you want to see.
All right. Thank you very much, Ephraim Lenka Dewa. Very, very, very well put. I take a few comments here, then I ask you the final question. Somebody says here, that's Abe's Esho, he said, true, Nigeria is corrupt because we Nigerians are corrupt. Dio says, the politics of Nigeria is money politics, bribery and corruption, such as witnessed during the PDP and APC primaries. How can we move forward to a better Nigeria in this kind of situation? We have not even started. Datong says, my first question on how to harness the talent of the people of Nigeria to ensure that we build our infrastructure largely by ourselves to create jobs rather than outsourcing our jobs can do to the right, outsourcing our job to the Chinese, he means, you know. So he asked that question, but we never really answered it, but that's okay, maybe another time. So in the final analysis, you know, in wrapping up, before I allow you to take your final shot, I just want to say to the people on the platform that we all can help, you know, in trying to get people to get their PVCs. I tried to make a representation to INEC, and it was simple. Everybody in Nigeria can get registered for their PVC within a one-week structure. The very first time we registered to get our voters card, they came to the polling units to do it. People did not have to go and congregate at INEC offices in the local government. In some villages, the local government is so far from people's village that they can't go. If funding is a problem, they can be volunteers. People are ready to give up their time for 1 week. INEC train them, move this registration back to the polling units. And in 1 week, everybody in Nigeria that needs a PVC will have been registered. The problem will now remain with INEC to produce the cards, bring them back to those same polling units and distribute it. 1 week to register, go and produce the cards, another week to come and distribute them. And then we will stop all this running around that people are doing, go to INEC office, don't go, register and don't register. Well, that's just my own solution to that problem, quite frankly. If funding is a problem, we can create volunteers for that. But as we wrap up, Mr. Dewa, you have said a lot about what we can possibly do. And the question still remains, which is the final shot really. Do you think that a third force is possible? Is it possible? Should we mobilize around it? I will keep asking you that question. On this platform, we are non-political. Now that the primaries are done, we're going to try and get all the candidates now. We had aspirants before, but now from tomorrow, I think we will know all the candidates of all the parties, whether at presidential level, governorship level. We will get them and we will interrogate them. We will try to put before them what we believe they should be doing, not what they think they should be doing for us. All right. And if they agree that they will do that, we'll try to find a way to tie them around those commitments publicly. And then there must be timelines for measuring deliverables at such a time. That is what we intend to do as African Leadership Congress when we engage with all the candidates going forward from now that we know all the candidates. Thankfully, we have about 8 or 9 months to do that. And we believe that this time around, we must deeply, deeply interrogate our candidates and know their skills, their readiness to deliver on what we, the people, want, not what they are saying. Nobody is going to make a promise for you. You are going to say it yourself. So please keep faith with us on this platform. Everybody should be ready. We have a committee working on that already, and we'll be coming out with what we want. So I'll allow you to take the final shot as we close now, Mr. Dewa. Your final words.
Well, thank you very much, Sonny. I really appreciate the questions. And let me answer your question directly. I thought I'd answered it, but apparently not. So the answer to the possibility of a third force is an absolute yes. Yes, it's possible. Yes, it's possible. But I've also outlined some of the challenges, right? And some of the things that need to happen for that to be successful. But it is possible. Anything is possible with God. The next thing I want to touch on, and you know, Datong, my apologies for not addressing the great question actually that you gave me about infrastructure, and you know, let me finish my thoughts on the next part that I think ties into the question that has just been raised, and that is the use of technology. Maybe see if I can weave the answer to your question in here. I firmly believe that, you know, we have the technology to be able to sit in our homes and register to get our PVC and register to vote, and to actually cast our vote from home. I believe the technology exists to do that. The question is whether or not we want to deploy it, right? And this gets back to the issue of the vested interests. Vested interests probably would not like to see that happen because it takes away the ability to manipulate the system as it is. But the technology is there for us to do a lot of things as a country and to move us into that modern age that I talked about earlier. Technology will allow you, like I said, to vote from home if you want to, or at least speed up the process of voting. You know, as we know in the system right now, there's so many things that are unanswered. I mean, I sat there and I watched the entire delegate system play out, and we're still doing things by hand. And we're counting votes by hand. I think everybody has watched the the conventions that have taken place, and everything is still by hand. Why is that? Because that's susceptible to manipulation. If you go to technology, there are people that would argue that that also is susceptible to manipulation, that, you can go in there and manipulate technology. Yes, you can do that, but there are solutions around that. So I believe that the employment of security is a big part of the solution to our problems, to make sure that we have free and fair elections. And that's one of the things that I would continue to push, as a matter of fact. The fact that we have to have the ability to transition from where we are today to a modern economy, which includes the use of technology. This will begin to solve our security problem, among other things, solve the economic problem that we know we have. It will begin to solve a lot of things, and it will require, actually, it would increase the demand for excellence, like I've maintained, right? We need to increase the demand for excellence in this country so that people can actually perform. So it gets me to the point where I'd like to end on Datong's point, which is, if I were president, this whole country would be a construction site. And that's what I wanted to do for Plateau State. We need to build infrastructure. And the infrastructure, and I know there are movements afoot to try to do that. I think they're slow. I think they need to be sped up, because you know what? Infrastructure creates jobs. That begins to alleviate some of the concerns that we already have with our youth, right? We need a massive job creation program. I feel that this is something that the next president, I'm hoping that the policy folks that are going to be around him are going to be in a position to recommend that. We need to have something close to what the United States had, which is a Marshall Plan, 5-year plans, and there are states doing it. There's a lot of discussion about it. By the way, there is nothing that I've talked about today that Nigerians don't know about. There's nothing new under the sun. Okay, we all know the solutions. The question is whether or not we want to implement the solutions, whether or not we're ready to move forward in a different direction. And there are kids that are born in this system that don't know any other way. This is all they know. And they're not competitive on the global level, because the way we do business is different from the way the rest of the world does business. And I hear the voices saying, we're not the only corrupt country in the world. Yes, that is true. The United States, where I live, is probably the most corrupt country in the world. But I'll tell you something, they get things done. Things work over there. And the reason is because of the system that they have set up. So if we're going to emulate the American system, let's emulate it in its entirety. Yes, we're going to have challenges. Yes, there's going to be corruption, because that's just the way we are as human beings. But it's the level of that corruption that really is troubling. It should be troubling to all of us, because you know what? It's holding us hostage. It's preventing us from moving forward. And so I'll end on that. I think, the future can be bright. We're not in a good place right now. We need to make substantial change in the way we think. The social contracts that some people have mentioned here, I'm a big proponent of that. We need a new social contract. We need to look at ourselves in the mirror and see who we really are as a people, and see whether or not we're ready for change. Until we as a people are ready for change, we get the leadership we deserve. And I want to end by thanking the Global Leadership Group for this opportunity. Thank you very much. Thank you, Pastor Ituah. Thank you, Sonny. And thank you for the audience for showing up. And more importantly, I want to thank my supporters, my friends, my family that were in the trenches with us as we were in the gubernatorial race. And lastly, I'd like to thank my family and my beautiful wife, Sophia. Thank you very much. And I wish everybody has a great evening or afternoon, wherever you are, or morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dewa. It was nice, really, really having you. So everybody, again, thank you for coming on behalf of African Leadership Group and Pastor Ituah. My name is Sonia Nebi. Enjoy the rest of your evening. See you again next week, same time. This time around, we'll be bringing candidates, not aspirants, okay? And we'll be interrogating them further on what they intend to do for us. So thank you very much. Have a good evening. Bye-bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you all, everyone. Thank you very much.
Okay, Pastor Ituah, you're here.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm still here. Okay, thank you all. Thank you, Dewa. Thank you, Florian. Thank you very much. God bless you. Okay, thank you. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Sonny, thanks a lot, and God bless you.